Call of Duty Zombies is a mode that has evolved extensively over the years, and as a result, it has become increasingly harder to tell what the core fundamentals of the mode were created from. But obviously, it is unequivocally important that we understand the basics of where this mode derived from, and if we take a look back at 2008 with the release of World at War, we find our answer with Nacht or Untoten. Nacht or Untoten is the map that started the Zombies mode. It is the map that gave us the core fundamental Zombies features like the concept of rounds, the mystery box, and heck, even the ray gun. Since the map was released so long ago and has become extremely well known amongst longtime fans of this mode, it is no surprise that the map has returned in some way, shape, or form over the years to bring nostalgia into the mix, which is something that is heavily applicable and present in the modern days of Zombies, with of course the original crew returning in Black Ops 7. So I wanted to cover every single appearance of the specific map that has ever been present in the game since World at War to show off the truly captivating number of times this map has returned to provide some perspective on how far the mode has actually come. What better Nacht or Untoten to start with than the original, the one that was released alongside World at War and was secretly tucked away behind the completion of the campaign. Yep, that's right, in order to have access to this mode initially, one had to complete the fantastic campaign of World at War, and with a completion would come a genuine jump scare that shocked many unsuspecting players at the time. The introduction of zombies to Call of Duty was inherently unheard of at this point in the development of the game, as all the way up to this point, Call of Duty had been very proud of the realism that they had portrayed, as their competition, believe it or not, at the time was Medal of Honor, which, if you have ever played it, is a very gritty and somewhat realistic interpretation of war. By adding a zombies mode, Treyarch were taking a very big swing, and their first step around the bases would be the simple release of Nacht or Untoten. Unlike the intense and crazy experiences we get nowadays with new releases and the modern games, Nacht or Untoten was as simple of a map as you could possibly get, with 3 total doors to unlock the map and the only way to get viable weaponry through the mystery box. But this is a great map to introduce the core systems of zombies. Players quickly grasped onto the idea of the point system, leading to the purchasing of wall weapons in the spawn room, to the purchasing of doors, and eventually the mystery box. This map would introduce the most iconic weapon in arguably Call of Duty history, the ray gun, which compared to today was easily one of the more powerful guns in the box until people found out you could reach rounds into the thousands by simply using a flamethrower, but whatever. It was such an oddball weapon to place into the game, and once again it diverged Call of Duty even more away from the realism they were once promoting so heavily. One thing this map did exceptionally well is the concept of horror, which of course was easily accomplished due to the unexpectedness of the mode in the first place, and of course it being zombies. But despite the fact this map in the modern era is very lacking with content and could be seen as one of the lesser maps because of it, there is no doubt that this clearly had its place in the development of the zombies mode as a whole. Nearly almost exactly a year after the release of World at War in 2008, another Call of Duty would be released that is not something many were expecting whatsoever at the time, and that would be a game simply called Call of Duty Zombies. Now, you are probably wondering what in the world I am even talking about, but it most likely is because the game was only released onto mobile devices, specifically iOS devices, making it one of the most forgotten zombies games of all time. However, this mode did have some form of significance outside of it being a horrible, blocky, and untextured rendition of the World at War Zombies mode. This version of the map featured nearly the same things as World at War did, with the same wall weapons, doors, and mystery box, but it did include an interesting feature that was exclusive to this version of Zombies. There was an interesting mode that was not seen until much later in Zombies that was introduced here, with a tutorial mode that actually featured Richtofen himself, who had been introduced in the DLC cycle later in World at War, telling you what to do. He would give basic Zombies instructions and would eventually get up and turn into a zombie himself, which marks the only time we actually saw a zombified Richtofen in-game, which is honestly so random but truly an oddity in the history of zombies. The only other thing worth mentioning about this version of Nacht or Untoten was that there were howling wolves that could be heard in the distance, which had previously not been present on the original version of Nacht or Untoten, and it's just a strange addition to the mode. It is worth mentioning this mode did not last very long though, as in 2018 this game was unfortunately deleted off the App Store, rendering it unplayable and a form of lost media for zombies. It didn't take long for Nacht or Untoten to return, and in fact it only took until the next game, Black Ops, where it would would be re-released in a DLC known as Resurrection. This DLC would be attached to the final map of the game Moon, and it didn't just feature Nacht und Toten, but it featured every other World at War map at the time. This version of Nacht und Toten did bring a loading screen comic though, which caused a lot of confusion upon its initial release and still manages to confuse me to this day. I mean, like, what is even happening here? The lack of change from the original map was honestly expected though, as from what I understand, the entirety of the Resurrection DLC was essentially just ported from World at War, meaning that the wall weapons from the game stayed the same, which allowed players to use weapons not seen in Black Ops like the Thompson and Kar 98K. The box was changed pretty significantly, however, as it would bring with it all of the Black Ops weapons seen in the game, as well as the Thunder Gun, which was a massive advancement in terms of firepower on the map, as obviously it did not feature a pack-a-punch machine. There was one singular perk, however, that was added onto this map, and with it being the only one, you may assume that it would be an extremely helpful one like Juggernog or Quick Revive, right? No, it's Mule Kick. Okay, well that's about it for Black Ops, and we are nowhere near done with this list. Black Ops 2 apparently couldn't hold back long enough, and it just had to feature in the game in the launch map. But of course, Nacht und Toten was not the launch map of Black Ops 2, it was Transit, so what am I even talking about? Well, in the cornfields tucked pretty far away from the main bus route, there is a structure that quite literally resembles the Nacht und Toten building, and as of right now, it is unclear as to why it is actually here. However, earlier this year, there was a huge leak of developer documents revolving around the development of Black Ops 2, and clearly there was more planned with this building. In the code for this section of Transit, the Nacht und Toten building is known as, quote, the prototype, and looking at the specific section of the developer document, it states, OG characters dead in prototype, you need to free them to start their quest in World at War. So this is obviously insane, and clearly this building was supposed to have much more significance than it actually did, which can be lumped in with one of the hundreds of things Transit was supposed to include. Looking at this from a story perspective, I honestly don't really know why it would have been here. Maybe Broken Arrow built it to simulate possible scenarios that they had observed overseas where Nacht took place, but I have no clue. But this was not all Black Ops 2 was going to include with Nacht und Toten, as with the recently uncovered release of pre-alpha gameplay of a Zombies Chronicles-like experience for Black Ops 2, Nacht und Toten was amongst the maps to be released. Now obviously this build of the map was nowhere near finished, and in fact the only difference about this version of the map compared to the Black Ops 1 version were the BO2 weapons. So it's nothing really crazy to talk about, but people often forget that a Chronicles like DLC was supposed to release for Black Ops 2 but got pushed to Black Ops 3 instead. Before that though, one of the most forgotten Call of Duty Zombies modes of all time would have a very weird version of Nacht und Toten in Call of Duty Online. For those who don't know, Call of Duty Online was a game exclusively released in China of all places and was essentially a melting pot of a ton of different Call of Duty games, but it did feature a zombies mode and even a version of Nacht und Toten. This version of Nacht und Toten was simply known as Outpost and was a futuristic and technical take on the map, which is, mind you, literally the most insane thing I think I've ever said. It is really hard to cover this in the video without getting into the insane mechanics of this mode in general, but this map was so far from the original Nacht as it is seemingly in a city during the daytime and has a lot of computers and wiring around, which is obviously very different from what we see in Nacht. If you would like to know more about this mode in general and more information on Nacht und Toten, please go check out this video I made about the whole mode. The zombies in the game is super interesting and is something that nobody really even ever talks about, and I cover it in much more detail there. Getting back to form though, Black Ops 3 decided to bring back Nacht und Toten as well, and in fact it was brought back in the final DLC of the game, Revelations. Alongside a lot of the older maps we had seen over the years, Nacht und Toten was brought into the game as a reference, so to speak, and was actually one of the more important parts of the map, as it had the shield build table, Juggernog, access to Pack-a-Punch, the challenge podium, and even inclusion in the map's main Easter egg. Like all the other references in this map, it did not really have too much importance, but this version of Nacht und Toten clearly was pivotal for the map, and honestly was one of the better versions of the maps that were brought back in this map in my opinion, and I find it pretty symbolic that it was the center hub of all the maps. But of course, Black Ops 3 was not done, as with the release of the highly anticipated Zombies Chronicles, Untoten would of course be featured as one of the 8 that would be released. This version of Untoten would be significantly different than any that came before it, however, as it would bring along with it the systems of Black Ops 3, which included aspects such as weapon kits, the Wonder Fist to have access to almost all the perks in the game, and the most game-changing one, Gobblegum. Gobblegum essentially opened up so many opportunities for this map. It allowed players to have access to pack-a-punch weaponry, it allowed for OP drops to be spawned, it allowed for access to unlimited perks, and overall it just broke the experience completely. Of course it did for literally every other map in the game, but this one was affected the most in my opinion, as its bare bones nature was completely thrown away. Despite that, this is actually one of my favorite versions of this map because of its insanely beautiful graphics and just the availability of actual content that arguably wasn't present on the previous versions. This map also brought along with it the Black Ops 3 weaponry, the Thunder Gun once again, and even the Ray Gun Mark II, as well as a tiny Easter egg to earn a max ammo. This Easter egg was featured on every Chronicles map and was very simple, just shooting Samantha dolls, but it was cool to see, I suppose. Outside of that, this map was beautiful and the gameplay of Black Ops 3 just made it so much better, but of course they never thought it was necessary to change the zombie speed on round 1, so it is still excruciatingly slow to get past round 1. We would actually take a break from seeing Untoten in Black Ops 4 for once. I don't really know how we did that, but of course they couldn't hold back and had to include it with a little game known as COD Mobile. This one was a little unexpected for sure, but Call of Duty Mobile, at least the one that still exists, had a Untoten experience within it that was available in early 2020. Now surprisingly, and I know this is crazy, but this is one of the craziest versions of Untoten we have ever had. First and foremost, you have the ability to go outside the map for the first time ever to this area out here. And then on top of that, there are perk machines all over the map, allowing full range of perk variety without the Wonder Fizz we saw in Black Ops 3. On top of this, we got small little Easter eggs around the map, such as the shootable teddy bears and radios, a secret door that had to be opened by shooting the oil barrels, and overall this map was honestly filled with some of the most content we have ever seen in Untoten before, which again is just so weird to say considering it's Call of Duty Mobile. It doesn't just stop there though, as this map additionally features a smorgasbord of special enemy types, including both the Napalm Zombie from Shangri-La and even the Denizens from Transit, which is just so weird to even say and honestly sounds like a hoax or something. Obviously, I never played this version of it when it was out, so I could be missing even more content, but from what I have seen, that is what I have gathered with the experience. Truly one of the zombies experiences of all time, and something that unfortunately cannot be played anymore. In late 2020, the launch map of Cold War Zombies would release, with it of course being D Machine. However, for those with a keen eye or just a regular one, you would quickly notice that the main bunker next to the spawn room of the map is clearly a depiction of Untoten, which actually is pretty cool to see in this version. It is completely weathered by the elements and has even been covered head to toe in graffiti, random greenery, and lights that show signs of its age, which is honestly something I don't hate about this map. A lot of people scramble to say that this makes the map worse, but in my opinion it is so different from what Nacht was that it is nothing more than a simple reference to me, as well as a functioning section of the map for gameplay purposes. It features the location of the wonder weapon of the map and even a lot of the steps for the upgrades associated with it as well, so it is nice to see it is integrated with the map well. It is also surprisingly the first version of Untoten that gives us access to the roof, where the very well-known camping strategy lies, and honestly I really like D Machine, and for Untoten to be here, it's just a little bonus. But would it even be a Treyarch Zombies game if it didn't feature at least twice? Well, clearly the developers thought so with the release of Forsaken, as people found this Easter egg in the arcade section of the map that would allow you to play a minigame of Untoten. This minigame would feature the spawn room of Untoten and would strip you down to a basic pistol with the goal of attempting to kill as many zombies as possible as quickly as possible. Eventually, after completing the first wave, you would get a simple loot crate with some salvage. After completing the second wave, you would get a loot crate once again and a DMR for more ammo, and after the third wave, you would get a third loot crate that would feature high-grade loot within it. Now, honestly, I like the cameo of Nacht and the idea of round-based zombies in Cold War, but it does feel kind of slightly forced here, but I still appreciate the inclusion of the map as a callback to where the mode began began for the finale of Cold War. But at least as of making this video, that is the last time we have ever seen Nacht and Untoten in Call of Duty Zombies. I honestly would not be surprised at all if Treyarch released some form of Nacht and Untoten just to mess with us for Black Ops 6 or even Black Ops 7, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. With all of those Nacht and Untoten maps, it officially means that Nacht and Untoten has featured 10 total maps spanning across 8 separate games, which is absolutely insane to even hear. But let me know what you guys think on Nacht and Untoten, and if you like the video, consider liking, and that would be greatly appreciated. But with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.